Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we're so glad to have you here. New Jersey's 7th Congressional District is one of the most closely watched battlegrounds in the 2026 midterms, and its Republican incumbent, Congressman Tom Kean Jr., just returned to Congress after being absent for nearly 4 months. That raised serious questions about representation and his re-election chances. Kean, who last voted on March 5th, revealed he was hospitalized and treated for depression. His experience highlights the hidden struggle many high-profile leaders face under public pressure. Standing by is Dr. Tara Chalakani, award-winning psychotherapist and CEO of Preferred Behavioral Health Group. First up, though, while he was away, Congressman Kean missed more than 140 roll call votes at a time when House Republicans are navigating a razor-thin majority. Joining us now to break it all down is Micah Rasmussen, director of the Rebovich Institute for New Jersey Politics at Rider University. Micah, it is always so good to see you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Happy summer, Laura.
Oh, happy summer to you. So we have a really unusual situation. Tom Kean Jr. is clearly going through a very difficult time. Let's listen to what the congressman had to say when he returned to the House floor.
Talking about myself has never come naturally. But I believe that I owe an explanation to the people of New Jersey's 7th District, to my colleagues in this chamber, and to the American people for my absence. Several months ago, due to health concerns, I entered the hospital for some testing. I did not believe that this would result in a long-term stay. I was given the diagnosis of depression. Now, when people hear the word depression, many people think simply it means feeling sad. But depression is so much more than that. It is physical. It is emotional. And until you experience it yourself, it is difficult to fully understand how powerful this illness can be.
Okay, Micah, I want to get your take on this. Many people struggle with depression, and we've had other people in Congress, so I just wanted to get your take on what the congressman had to say and how he addressed it.
Yeah, so I think that you're right that this is something every family has dealt with. Everybody's got a friend or a family member who has dealt with this. And so it's very easy to empathize on a human level, to welcome Congressman Kean back, be very glad that he has worked his way through his acute problem. And so on a human level, that's all been great and that's all been positive. I do think that from the campaign perspective, we probably move on from here and aren't focusing on this on the fall. So that's a good thing for him as well. Among some quarters, and this is certainly not going to be the case among his supporters, but among some quarters, there are lingering questions about how he dealt with this all the way along and all the way through. And in those floor comments that you just had the quote from, he does address that. He says, I didn't know how long it was going to be. I would have probably been more transparent if I could have been all the way through. But, he sort of kept the public in the dark for a long period of time, didn't know what was happening. And so that created this sense of mystery and anticipation of what was going on, and this nationwide search for him, people going looking for him, which was not a positive thing. And it's certainly something that people are going to remember about him and now identify with him.
And I think when it comes to any person, no matter who you are, right, you do have a right to privacy. The public isn't necessarily entitled to know what is happening. But when you are a public servant, how do you really strike that balance with, from a reporter's perspective, trying to call the office, get information out? There are ways that other people have handled it to address. We're aware. We're not sure of a timeline. What would you say would be, as somebody who's, worked in communications, worked for, Governor Jim McGreevey, somebody who is now at Rider University, is there a right way, wrong way, or a better way to handle things like this while respecting certain things should be and are off limits?
Right. So you're absolutely correct that this was his decision as far as what level of privacy to afford himself how much he needed and wanted to share, when he wanted to share it. That's all his decision. And he gets the right to make it. But there are ramifications of that. The public has a right to respond as well. And so I would always urge a public official who has a special relationship and a special kind of employment with their constituents, right? They don't punch a clock like anybody else. Our Constitution recognizes the unusual kind of employment arrangement because we know that members of Congress can raise their own salaries. So we set parameters around that. I think that sort of begs a greater level of disclosure, right? You don't have to punch a clock. So I think the public does need to know, if for no other reason, Laura, to set that level of deference and that level of understanding that the congressman would want. And so I'm always going to urge you to put as much out there as you possibly can, not in terms of, chapter and verse or prognosis or anything like that, but as much as you can possibly say. And so, the one that jumps out in my mind, you asked about Governor Murphy right before COVID. You'll remember he got sick. He had cancer, and he talked about it, and he said, he was going in for an operation, and so he was recuperating in the early days of COVID. And so I think that lets the public understand what's going on. It lets the public understand the limitations. It is a different office. It's governor, where we're looking to a governor every day. I think sometimes the fact that a member of Congress is not somebody we're looking at every day maybe leads to the conclusion that you don't have to be as upfront. I think that in this case kind of blew up. It kind of created this sense of what's going on that set this whole thing in motion that sort of got away from him. And he alluded to that. And even the Speaker of the House said he would have urged more transparency and more disclosure.
Well, and what about all the votes that he missed, right? If somebody steps aside from Congress, or something happens, they're not able to fulfill their duties, it's not the same as a U.S. Senate or a governor's race where they have somebody that steps in, or maybe I'm not understanding that. So when you miss, is there any point where you're saying, okay, well, you've missed this many votes, and he had over 100 votes missed, that there's a mechanism that steps in and says, okay, at this point, you need to do something, address that. Like, how do you handle that, because you're missing votes?
It's a good,
yeah,
it's an important question. Unfortunately, there's nothing that really governs this. It is completely the call of the member. The only two mechanisms that the House has to deal with its own members, one would be to expel them, two would be to censure them. And neither of those were really going to be on the table in this case, were really going to be appropriate in this case. Other than that, it is entirely policing and deciding on your own standard that you want to set. And you're absolutely right, Laura. There were at least 4 very close votes where Congressman Kean's vote would have made the difference in this closely divided House, where one vote would have potentially made the difference in the outcome of that vote. And that's just the nature of our politics right now. And that's what we're dealing with. And so, you see this with other cases in Congress. Senator McConnell, from Kentucky, is now in the hospital, and we're wondering, what's going on with his prognosis, and why are we not knowing anything? Are we trying to stave off a special election in that case? And so there are going to be questions about this as long as our chambers are as divided as they are, and the outcome of that single vote, not voting, is going to make a difference. For lower level offices in New Jersey, a town council or something like that, they can remove a member for non-attendance, but that's not the case when we get to the House of Representatives or the Senate.
And the public, whatever, no matter what people are entitled to that level of privacy, ultimately the voters, they have their own way of deciding, the court of, the public opinion. And you have other people who have dealt with depression. I think the top of mind is Senator John Fetterman of Pennsylvania, who right after he was in office, was hospitalized, and they were fairly transparent, and people were wondering, is he going to be able to fulfill his duties? I mean, this is it's a slippery slope, and these narrows of margins that House is so closely divided. Can you talk just a little bit about this absence and the legislative headaches that leadership must deal with when you're dealing with must-pass bills and things that affect your constituents at home?
Oh, absolutely. There's no question that Speaker Johnson was called on frequently to update on what was happening with Congressman Kean and didn't have very much that he could say. And so when you're being called on the carpet, that's uncomfortable. That's not something you want to have to deal with. And, the more that, the more uncomfortable you're making the speaker, the more he's going to want you to get back in the limelight and be able to take over the questions. And so he was no doubt not happy with the way that it was being handled, but, they were stuck. There is no advanced planning that led to, here's the plan we're going to follow, here are the steps we're going to take, here's what we're going to disclose. So that was really, that was the problem. It was not something that was anticipated. You're right to bring up John Fetterman as an example. He was much more transparent, and that might be an example that politicians could follow. However, I will also note, we read there was an interview in the New York Times after he came back where he sort of wishes, he has expressed that he wishes that he was not as transparent. And the reason why he said that is because he feels like his mental illness was weaponized and it was used against him, and it was brought up again and again. And so he felt uncomfortable and sort of wishes he could go back and do it again. So I don't know if that weighed on Congressman Kean's mind. I have no idea. But certainly, again, the good news is Congressman Kean was in 4th of July parades over the holiday. He was all smiles. He was with his wife. He looked very happy. He sounds like much stronger than he did, and so I will say that it's a wonderful thing to see. Again, from a political campaign perspective, I think that we're probably through those toughest of questions that he was dealing with. It's not like his opponent, Rebecca Bennett, is now going to bring that up. She was reluctant to talk about it herself while he was away. And so I think we're through with, we're moving past this issue now. Again, the question will be whether there are lingering impressions that it's left on voters that it's going to weigh on them. It's what they're thinking about when they think of Congressman Kean, when they go into the voting booth. But I think from a campaign perspective, we're probably through the tough questions.
Well, I mean, and when somebody's in the depths of whether it is dealing with depression, mental illness, physical illness, it is very hard to make decisions because you're focusing on your own health, and it's hard to, be able to make those decisions on what to do. Oh, I'm missing votes. Well, when push comes to shove, what matters is your own personal health. Definitely not easy. But as you mentioned, so Tom Kean Jr. is now facing Democrat Rebecca Bennett, and this is going to be a very expensive race. It's going to be probably one of the most competitive races in the country. What do you think we voters can make of what's going to be happening in the days and weeks? We're in the summer, things are not as in your face with the campaign ads. What do you think the driving issues will be in that 7th district, which that district goes back and forth? It tends to go Democrat, Republican, and yeah.
I'm glad you asked. And, we knew the competitive nature of the race that we were heading into long before March 5th when Congressman Kean was hospitalized following his last vote. We knew this was going to be one of the most competitive races in the nation. It's something that he's been bracing for. It's one of the reasons why there was such a strong field of Democrats who wanted to take him on, and Rebecca Bennett winning that primary race. So this has been coming for a long time. As you say, we have seen this district represented by Congressman Lance, and then Congressman Malinowski, and then Congressman Kean. And so this is a true swing district. President Trump carried the district in 2024, but then Governor Sherrill carried the district in 2025. And so this is a district that can go in either direction. There's no question that what is on voters' minds going into the midterm elections this fall is what midterm elections always are, which is a referendum on the White House. It's a referendum on the president and a referendum on the president's party. And when one party is seen as getting too far out there, there is a pendulum that swings back and voters bring it back. And we've seen that time and time again. President Trump and his party have struggled when he is not on the ballot, when it is the midterm election, when there's a whole group of presidential voters who helped him get elected who are not coming out for the midterms. Meanwhile, Democrats are more energized. And so what's going to be on their minds this fall, voters' minds this fall, is not so much what happened in the springtime and the votes that were missed. What's going to be on their minds this fall, and I don't think that's what you're going to see advertised. I think what's going to be front and center is a referendum on President Trump and how people are feeling about President Trump. So we're going to be thinking about the war. We're going to be thinking about gas prices. We're going to be thinking about the economy and inflation. And those are things that can be really dicey for the president's party. And certainly Congressman Kean has struggled with how much he wants to be a defender of the president, how much he wants to strike out different than the president, and how much can you really even do that when you're with the president's party. So that's what I think we're going to be seeing this race all about in the fall.
All right, Micah Rasmussen, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It is always a pleasure to see you.
You too, Laura. Thank you.
Joining me now is Dr. Tara Chalakani, award-winning psychotherapist, CEO of Preferred Behavioral Health Group, and mental health expert. Doctor, it's so good to see you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Laura. Always a pleasure.
Congressman Tom Kean described depression as something way more than feeling just sad and noted there really isn't a fixed timeline for recovery. Let's first hear what he had to say about depression from the House floor.
Now, when people hear the word depression, many people think simply it means feeling sad. But depression is so much more than that. It is physical. It is emotional. And until you experience it yourself, it is difficult to fully understand how powerful this illness can be. The doctors recommended that I remain in the hospital to address my illness. They explained to me that this would be the fastest way to recovery. And to be honest, I was hesitant. I didn't think that I had time for it. I had responsibilities to my family. I had responsibilities to my constituents. I had responsibilities to this institution.
So, Doctor, from your clinical experience, you heard what the congressman said. When you are a high-profile role like this one, what does the day-to-day reality look like, right? Because people have this stigma. You can push through it. You can just power on through it. You can act. You can mask your way through it. But it really, for some people, it really isn't that easy. It is impossible, in fact.
You're correct, Laura. And I want to wish the congressman our heartfelt wishes for his continued mental health and healing, because it is very difficult. It's difficult for anyone, Laura, but when you are in a position of public authority or in the spotlight, it adds a very thick layer of complexity to managing your day-to-day functioning. And the one thing that I really appreciate is that depression is not one size fits all. And If you have 100 people with that diagnosis and you line them up, you will see 100 different presentations of the mental health disorder. For some, yes, it is. It's that textbook sadness or crying or even feeling suicidal, but very often it can be very subtle. It could be appetite changes, sleep changes, irritability, just not feeling excited about things that once excited you. So there are a tremendous different symptoms, and they look different on everyone. So I applaud the congressman, because unfortunately it takes someone of his stature to really lift the veil and start to destigmatize this mental health disorder that impacts hundreds of thousands of Americans every year.
Right, and especially when you have somebody in a leadership public position, they are kind of inclined to let me just push through it. And he mentioned that he really thought that he could do that. But why do you think that is so common? And what is the risk in trying to push through when your body is saying, no, I can't do this?
Well, there's a couple different reasons, Laura. I think that, depression, like many other disorders, occur on a spectrum ranging from mild, moderate to severe. So when it is moderate to mild, perhaps you can push through. Perhaps people were able to do that, but that is not true for everyone. But I think the other important piece to consider is that we do live in a culture where it's like, oh, you're sad, get over it. There is a stigma, especially with men. Men acquire mental health services less than half as often as women, because I do think that there is this persona they feel that they need to have, that it's not macho to get help, or they're less of a man, and it couldn't be further from the truth. And the way I approach treating mental health disorders, the same way my peers do, is the way we would treat any other malady that we would encounter as a human being, whether it's a broken bone or a sore throat or anything that could possibly happen. Very often we need to seek medical help, and this is no different. But I think the more we speak about it, the more we understand actually what the symptoms are, and the more we know that there is no shame in acquiring assistance when we are struggling mentally. Only then will people reduce the stigma and get the help that they need.
And that help can be through therapy, it can be through meditation, it can be through medication. But when you're in a high profile elected office, that is adding an extra layer of pressure. You're constantly visible. You've got media scrutiny, political expectations, leadership, the President of the United States, weighing in. So how does living in the public eye uniquely impact somebody struggling with depression?
Well, again, we're human beings first, before any title or profession. So whether you're a congressman or the president, we are human beings. And sometimes we do have medical issues that have to be addressed. And that happens. It's surgical or otherwise. And sometimes we have to take the time that we need away from our positions to get the help that we need. But like I said earlier, the more people understand that mental health is physical health. There is no difference between what is going on in your brain versus what is going on in any other organ in your body. Once we start talking about it, destigmatizing, and getting the help we need, the less newsworthy it will be. I hope I live in a world where that's the case someday. But it is difficult, yes. Like we said, when you're in the public eye, when the public are your job to care for the residents of New Jersey and the residents of this country, yes, but we still do have to care for ourselves and seek medical treatment when necessary.
The congressman talked about owing an explanation to his district, to his colleagues, to the public, and he even said that he hoped that sharing his story would encourage others. So as someone who yourself works to reduce that mental health stigma, how powerful are his words when he gets up in the halls of Congress and speaks openly on this?
I believe they're incredibly powerful. And I mean, when there is a 100-day absence, I think as a public servant, yes, people are owed an explanation because it's questioned. But I do believe that his coming out and speaking so openly about his journey will prompt others to do the same, and for people to realize that there is no discrimination when mental health is at stake. It doesn't matter your race, your profession, your religion, your socioeconomic status. It impacts everyone.
You know, final thoughts here. Making that first phone call, actually asking for help, it is oftentimes the most challenging because in general, we put ourselves last. It's easier to take care of other people, other things. There's always something on the to-do list, and we tend to put ourselves last. And it can feel overwhelming. Why is that? And, you know, just again, final thoughts, if somebody's watching, can relate to this, you know, what you want people to know about the significance, how monumental just picking up the phone can be when you're looking at something saying, well, this is too much. I can't function. I can't do this. How something as simple as picking up the phone, going for a walk, calling a friend, calling, you know, a professional, what a difference that can make.
It is. And the first step is the hardest and it's the most important. But I think, you know, if you look at the history of just behavioral health care, it's not that long ago that we used really harsh terminology like lunacy, right, to describe a mental health disorder. We've come very far in a very short time span, just in this century alone. And I do believe there is, you know, a great population of our country and our state that would never get mental health care. They do see it as a sign of weakness, but it isn't. And anybody that's listening, I hope that you get the message that we are all susceptible to mental health disorders. It doesn't make us crazy. It doesn't make us less than, but we need help. And if you would seek help for any other physical ailment or diagnosis, don't hesitate to do it for your mental health, because mental health directly correlates to physical health. And we deserve to take care of ourselves and to be our own best friend and advocate.
Well, Doctor, we thank you so much for your insight, time, analysis, and good advice. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
And that'll do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.